Okay, so this is a TADSummit Revisited. Next one we'll be doing will be a TADSummit preview, where we interview some of the people that will be presenting at TADSummit 2016. But this is a Revisited, and it's on the session that was presented by Brian from Artisan Infrastructure on delivering reliable telephony with desktop as a service. Now we have Evin Hunt with us, who I'm sure some of you remember as was the CTO of Shango, but is now the Chief Strategy Officer at Artisan Infrastructure. So welcome, Evin, and maybe you could provide a quick intro to Artisan and your new role.
Thanks, Alan. Hi, everybody. Good to see or talk to you again. I guess the last time was in Istanbul, when I actually got to see and mingle with the group, which is always a lot of fun. So yeah, I obviously was at Shango. We ended up winding Shango down. I think it may have been a little bit ahead of its time, or maybe a little bit too different from what everybody needed. So still a good concept, and they're carrying it on as a different company with just like a small few people, and they renamed it and everything. So I'm sure you'll hear about it if they haven't already contacted any of you. Still a great technology. But I came over to Artisan after we wound that down officially, and I've known Brian Hierholzer for years, and actually Artisan used to be Artisan Communications and had an actual hosted VoIP solution. Started about, I think, 10 or 12 years ago, selling Cisco hosted Cisco seats off of a M6 platform. So been doing that for years. We still have that as kind of a side business, if you will. But the main business Brian got into several years ago was infrastructure as a service. He got really good at the virtual machine world and security around it. So Artisan Infrastructure just exploded in growth very quickly. Its main competition is like Amazon or Rackspace or other people providing VMs, but those are on a retail level, right? So I think actually I'm addressing one of the first questions that was on the blog as well, but it's part of what we do, right?
Yeah.
So how do we compete? Why are we different than an AWS or a Rackspace or a DigitalOcean or somebody like that? Well, we focus on the managed service provider community, the MSPs, the IT shops that deal with all the small businesses. And yes, as one of those guys, you can go in and create an Amazon account and manage all of that, but there's no single pane of glass tool set that allows you to come in and not be super technical and do that. So we have a whole team that, from sales to sales engineering to, even a dedicated support team for MSPs that, kind of holds their hand through the whole process and, gives them an extra level of service. So, and also they can completely white label it. So our infrastructure is white labeled to whoever the MSP is, if they're on that tier of service. So it's essentially their infrastructure. And we get on calls. We're their sales team and support team when it comes to that as well. So we'll get on calls and with the customers as our MSP. So
Understood.
So infrastructure as a service has been the core business for the past several years. We've grown tremendously. One of the fastest growing in the industry. What we're doing now, though, is becoming more of a software provider instead of just an IaaS provider. So what we're doing, we're building the tool sets on top of the IaaS that are white labelable as well. So you've got your desktop as a service, your workspace as a service. We've got Neverfail, which is a business continuity software. It was an acquisition we did a few years ago. And we've got a new UC platform that we're still kind of behind the scenes on getting ready. So it's white labelable for the MSPs to actually brand a UCaaS solution, but it's all run in our infrastructure. So it's just one of the portfolio products that the MSP can come as a one-stop shop and brand as their own and take to market.
Gotcha. And then your role in the organization?
My role, so I got brought on as Chief Strategy Officer. Primarily focus was to get the UC practice going, get it off of the old M6 platform, kind of redo the whole thing and help build it as one of the portfolio products for Artisan. After that's done and that's launched, which should be within the next few months, then my role will actually kind of merge over the rest of the product portfolio from a strategy perspective.
Understood. So then maybe, because you've done one, we'll skip over two, because I think three is more relevant to what you've just described. So maybe you could explain a little bit more around what is desktop and workspace as a service and why enterprise would adopt them.
Okay, right. So desktop as a service is kind of the next generation or the next iteration of VDI, right? So desktop as a service is, I get all of my applications and my environment presented to me, essentially through a web browser wherever I'm at, similar to like what Citrix does. The workspace as a service is what's interesting because it's your single pane of glass provisioning, billing, support, management of the suite of applications that an end user might use. So it doesn't have to be delivered through desktop as a service. Workspace as a service is more the tying of all the different disparate pieces together through a single pane of provisioning and management. And that's really what's interesting for the UCaaS environment is because that can be plugged in as one of the workspace as a service products, right? So this customer needs hosted seats as well. Click there, done, provisioned. They get all the notification stuff. They're set up. They just log in. And part of that is single sign-on for all of the applications. Part of that is this platform we're building on the back end, similar to like an OSS. Sorry. But if you think of like what we were doing at Shango, where we had this layer of API normalization to present to an ecosystem, it's similar to that, but it's points down into our infrastructure and then all the workspace applications and things that you would need. So with that, it's kind of a single pane of glass management, OSS or marketplace, if you will, for integrated applications that deploy to our infrastructure and are presented to the end users. They, the MSPs control their branding through it and so forth. But anyway, so I kind of went off on that product a little bit, but that's part of the workspace as a service solution, whereas desktop as a service is simply a delivery mechanism. Gotcha. So I think one thing that Brian and Marc talked about, and I haven't seen the presentation, but when they were at TADS in Lisbon, was delivering UC through desktop as a service. So in theory, yes, because it's all controlled centrally, right? So it makes sense to just pop up a browser and you have that as one of the channels in the desktop as a service. In theory, it sounds good, but right now the browser technologies, why not just have it delivered directly to the Chrome browser, your WebRTC client, as a separate channel from the end user. So if they're on something else that supports WebRTC or whatever, they can still log in and not have to load that full desktop as a service experience. So, when I came on, part of my thought was, let's not do that. Let's not push it through desktop as a service yet, but let's continue to experiment with that as an option down the road. I think it's maybe a little ahead of its time, but. Gotcha.
Okay, so would that restrict then the browsers you could run on, or would this be, if you're using Chrome, then we'll use the native WebRTC API. If you're using Safari or IE, then you'd use whatever resources, or would you have a downloadable client, or how would you manage that situation?
So we would have a downloadable client, but like a Chrome app, right? So you would need a Chrome browser, but still, it's going to be WebRTC supported browsers out of the gate, since that's what we're using. Part of our solution also is, instead of just being completely WebRTC and over the web with the UCaaS stuff, is, a lot of the customers of the MSPs we're dealing with are non-technical, and that'll scare the hell out of them. So they get desk phones, and it's just a kind of a drop it on the desk, it works. Here's a management portal, very dumbed down and simplified for you to text message and manage your voicemails through. But what we're doing is really geared around the MSPs that serve the non-technical business community. Now, what we're finding is MSPs are starting to well, actually, enterprises are starting to look a lot like MSPs or as service providers themselves, as we've talked about many times.
Yeah.
So an enterprise coming in and leveraging our infrastructure, which we have several very large ones come in and do, they basically run it as an MSP, right? So their customers are the non-technical organizations within their enterprise. So it works out quite well, the model that we have for that.
Gotcha. So then, actually, sort of jumping, because we're sort of racing through the questions quite nicely. So, from what I understand, so you're actually building out your own UCaaS solution that will be compatible with the delivery mechanism of desktop as a service, rather than trying to sort of craft a desktop as a service that can work with multiple UCaaS solutions.
Right now, that's what we're doing. But I like being agnostic to, everything should talk by APIs, whatever.
Exactly.
So, I like the idea, and you will probably see this from us, of opening it up when we have that workspace as a service and that whole provisioning marketplace thing done. I would love to see other solutions come in and plug in as well, because guess what they get to do is the customers that are served off of our infrastructure get a better quality of service. So now these other providers can come in and run their applications and deploy them within our environment. Kind of similar to what the Telestacks guys did with the RESTCOM store, which was great, where you have a RESTCOM instance or a Telestacks instance, and you can go in and select these applications that people have built, and it deploys into your environment, right? Yep. Same thing on the infrastructure side.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's really interesting.
That's down the road, but I can definitely see that happening.
Cool. So I guess just jumping to the last question, are there particular enterprise segments that you think will be more likely to adopt this proposition?
No, not really. It's based on needs, and we're actually pretty surprised at some of the ones that we have not proposed it to, but they heard about what we're doing, and they're like, hey, we want this. It's like, oh, okay, yes. We can bring that to you. So the enterprise segments that we're seeing, it's not any one specific segment.
Gotcha. And what's the main benefit? I mean, what's sort of driving them for this adoption?
The one-stop shop, the single pane of glass to manage everything. I don't have to have IT folks managing my Amazon account, and then we've got Google Cloud Engine over here, and I have to build all the mechanisms to orchestrate it all. It's done.
Exactly. And there's always fingers pointing at fingers whenever you have
there is. And one cool new technology that we're getting ready to release right now is an appliance that goes into an enterprise's existing data center, and it lets them manage their entire virtual machine, their VM cloud, as a single entity as part of ours as well. So they can go in and they have a single pane of management. They see all their resources and our resources and manage together. So it's really slick on bringing the two together. So that's cool. That's kind of one way we're getting into enterprises, right? Is
yeah. So that's a real hybrid cloud sort of scenario. So because workloads, how it is, we can claim everything should be in the cloud. Well, actually, there's certain stuff that you don't want to, or regulation, or for a whole. So this manages the reality of the fact that hybrid is going to be here for a long time to come.
Yep. It's part of the name of the product, actually. So it allows them to manage backups and snapshots and everything across the. So it's really slick.
Cool. Oh, that's really interesting. Well, again, this is it was just a chance to go ask a few more questions that we didn't have time because it was just such a packed agenda, and this was really interesting just to get that little bit more of a update and to understand in more detail. Sort of again, when you think of Artisan, you think, okay, it's cloud infrastructure. How can telecoms be irrelevant at all? But actually, the two link absolutely very tightly because of this, as you say, single pane of glass for managing all your communication or your enterprise applications, of which communication, and I guess in part you could imagine even like enterprise messaging could be a core piece of this as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add, Evin?
No, I hope to be at one of the events or the next event soon.
Absolutely. Well, we'll have TADHack Global. We'll have an Austin location, so it's just up the road from you. And then hopefully we'll see you in Lisbon in November to get an update and understand more of the customer success cases around your offer. So again, Evin, this was great. Thanks so much, and best of luck in your new role.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan.